would join us in the EU. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joost. And we finally have Alexander Jackson, who is senior editor at the Caucasian Review of International Affairs, who will be looking at the Turkey and the East, Russia, Caucasus, et cetera. Alex?
Thank you. I'd say that Eurasia is a vital part of Turkey's new foreign policy. The question is often framed as whether Turkey is Western or whether Turkey is Islamic, and I think we should always add to that the question of whether Turkey is Eurasian as well, because I think that's a very significant aspect of Turkey's new doctrine. And this new doctrine of zero problems with neighbours, this does underpin the whole approach to the region. It underpins Turkey's goal of being a regional energy hub, which is very significant. It underpins the thaw with Armenia, which is of course huge news, especially at the moment. And it also underpins Turkey's new strategic partnership with Russia. And I think, in particular, the strategic partnership with Russia is something we haven't seen the likes of this in several hundred years. This really does reverse centuries of competition and rivalry between the two states. And I don't quite feel that the significance of this process has been fully understood yet and fully appreciated. And it should, because Turkey and Russia together do have a vital role to play in the Caucasus and in Eurasia. And I think as these partnerships develop within the region, I think Turkey will begin to take on much more of a leadership role than it already is, which is going to be very significant. And the West does need to appreciate this. The West does need to appreciate the asset that Turkey can be within Eurasia. Not that, of course, that the West has any monopoly on what Turkey is going to do in Eurasia, but it does need to bear that in mind. And certainly, Turkey could within the Caucasus, especially Turkey could supplant or rival the current Western position in the region. And I think over the last year, the West, particularly the US, has been very disengaged. And I think Turkey has an opportunity to step up there. And I think domestically, Turkey is very pragmatic towards Eurasia. There's no defining ideology except the ideology of peace and of stability. There is, of course, pan-Turkism, which enjoyed a brief revival after the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, and there is also the Islam issue. But neither of these are very significant. Pan-Turkism failed as an experiment, partly because the Central Asian states were unwilling to listen to Turkey and to see Turkey as a kind of big brother figure. And of course, Islam isn't a very strong force within Central Asia at the moment. So I think what Turkey's future ideology will be towards the region is a much looser concept of Eurasianism, which transcends issues such as ethnicity and religion, and which is essentially a construct, really. How this ideology develops will depend, of course, on Turkey's internal dynamics, on these questions of secularism versus Islam that are currently being fought out. And also on the successes or failures of its current initiatives in the region, particularly the thaw with Armenia. I think Turkey's vision of Eurasia, such as it is still evolving, of course, and it will be dependent on these successes or failures. But the vision, I think, encompasses four key elements. Firstly, Turkey would like a Eurasia that is stable, of course. I mean, this is the bottom line, and it's perfectly natural and perfectly normal. Secondly, the region will be secular. Turkey has no real interest in a Caucasus or in a Central Asia which is Islamist in nature. This would go against Turkey's defining ideology, of course, at the moment. Eurasia would also, of course, be economically prosperous, economically interlinked with each other. Turkey would like to see itself as the linchpin of a regional hub of transportation and energy projects which would bind the region together. So economic prosperity in the region is good for Turkey. And fourthly, I think Eurasia would form its own axis. It would not be Western, it would not be Islamic, it would not be Eastern, it would be Eurasian. It would be capable of interaction with all the major powers without being overly influenced by either one of them. In this regard, I think it's interesting that recently the Turkish government has been calling for the creation of a Eurasian Union, which would be similar to the European Union in that it would be a common market. The economic aspect is the one that's focused on quite heavily. This would obviously be a very difficult challenge, and I don't think we should hold out much hope of this occurring. But it is interesting because it underlines the extent to which Turkey sees economic prosperity as key, and its own role in taking a leadership position in encouraging regional integration. So really what Turkey would like is a web of energy projects, of infrastructure projects, which would stretch in the end from Istanbul to Western China. And already we have the nucleus of that in the BTC pipeline, the BTE pipeline, and the BTK railroad stretching between Turkey and Azerbaijan. And so the next step would be to expand that across the Caspian Sea. Whether or not Turkey can make much progress with this project of regional integration depends on China to an extent. The next few years are going to be very interesting as China develops its influence in Central Asia, in the Turkic world. Whether that's bilaterally, as we're seeing at the moment, or whether it's through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which brings together China, Russia, and the 5 Central Asian states. Turkey's going to have to adapt to that. It's going to have to adapt to a rising China, and how it approaches that is going to be a very interesting question in the years ahead. And of course, there will be elements of competition, but I think Turkey is very interested in integrating itself within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and within a much deeper relationship with Beijing, which would further Turkey's current goal of having 0 problems with neighbors. It would simply expand that category of neighbors to include powers like China that have a real influence on Turkey's periphery. The other aspect on which Turkey's vision is dependent is, of course, Russia. How you view this partnership, I think, in part depends on how you view Russian actions in the Caucasus after the war with Georgia. I don't personally believe that we've seen as much of a geopolitical shift as many people expected at the time. Immediately after the war, there was an assumption that Russia was going to return to dominate the Caucasus and to restore its imperial heritage over the region. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think most of the dynamics that were there before the war are still there today. Russia achieved its objective, and it's quite satisfied with the result. What this means for Turkey is that its freedom of action still remains largely intact. The parameters which define its strategic freedom of movement are still quite wide. Certainly, in contrast to the West with the US, Turkey can do a lot in the Caucasus, whether that's economically or whether that's politically, without provoking too much Russian agitation. Of course, it's questionable whether Russia could accept a leadership role for Turkey, or even a role which was significant enough to be seen as co-leadership with Russia. And of course, the reverse is also true. For Turkey, Russia is still seen as a threat by many in the Turkish elite, and the August war between Russia and Georgia simply vindicated that view that Russia cannot be trusted, and that it does have designs on what it calls its near abroad in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Turkey is genuinely concerned about this, about Russian domination of Eurasia. This would really kind of limit its own strategic freedom of movement, and already we are seeing examples of how that could develop in the coming years. Russian attempts recently have been to lock up Azerbaijan's gas sector and to start moving towards monopolizing Azerbaijan's gas exports. This would directly contradict Turkey's national interests of being a regional energy hub and providing multi-vectors for Caspian gas to reach the outside world. At the end of the day, of course, Turkey does want multipolarity, not a Russian-sponsored unipolarity to replace a Western one. Despite these areas of disagreement, the strategic partnership which has developed in recent years between Russia and Turkey is really significant. I mean, Russia is now Turkey's largest import partner. They've increased security cooperation within the Black Sea. They're seeing eye to eye on many issues such as Cyprus and the Middle East peace process. And energy, of course, that's the big one. Russia is now responsible for 67% of Turkey's gas imports. What Russia is essentially saying with regard to gas and energy more generally is that Turkey can be a regional energy hub. Russia is willing to make it a regional energy hub, but only on Russia's terms, only by accepting